Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, the show where we decode mixed messages, raise the bar, and serve up real talk with a side of empowerment. I'm your host, Suzie, your go-to for truth bombs, clarity, and the kind of tough love that gets you unstuck and back in the driver's seat of your life. Together, let's turn those signals into action. Friends, let me ask you something right at the top. When was the last time you actually stopped long enough to acknowledge how far you've come? Not what you didn't do, not what didn't go according to plan, but what you did. The choices you made, the storms you survived, the boundaries you set, the moments you rose when you could have shut down instead. That's our journey today. We're diving into something compelling yet so often overlooked. Reflection. Not the Instagram version with shiny reels and highlight moments. I mean the real, raw, unfiltered work of looking at your life with honesty and compassion. The kind of reflection that doesn't just record wins, but transforms lessons into something so much better for you. Because growth doesn't start from perfection. It begins from the messy middle. Those sharp, cracked edges, those moments that made you question everything, but decide to rebuild anyway. So here's a thought, and stay with me, because this might be the most crucial episode you listen to all year. What if the very moments you thought broke you were actually the moments that built you? What if the hard parts were actually your hidden training ground, strengthening your emotional core for the year you're about to step into? That's what we're unpacking today. So grab your favorite cozy drink, curl into your corner of peace. Maybe you've got those twinkling fairy lights glowing. Perhaps you're lighting that slightly broken but deeply beloved candle. And settle in. Because today, we're not just reflecting, we're rising together. Reflection isn't about sitting in a corner, tallying everything that went wrong, or replaying your missteps like a blooper reel you can't turn off. It's about acknowledging the truth of your journey, the wins, the wounds, the wisdom, and honoring the person you became along the way. As some experts explain, meaningful reflection begins with intentional questions. Not the surface level, how was my year? But soul level questions that actually reveal insight, growth, and internal evolution. And one powerful prompt that sat with me asks, what challenges did you navigate this year and how did you move through them? This question isn't meant to reopen old wounds. It's meant to remind you of your strength. The key word here is through. Maybe this year you faced burnout, career uncertainty, a fractured relationship, illness, or an emotionally draining season you didn't see coming. Perhaps you carried more than maybe you ever said out loud. Psychological research has demonstrated that when we reflect on hardships with curiosity rather than criticism, we uncover resilience we didn't know we had. We start to see the quiet ways we kept going, even when life felt heavy. For some, the response to challenges looked like creativity in crisis, finding new ways to cope or reinvent routines. For others, it was finally listening when the body whispered, slow down. And for many, it was learning the difference between breaking down and breaking open. These moments didn't just test you, they shaped you. They strengthened emotional muscles that will serve you long after the year ends. But reflection isn't only about what was hard. It's also about recognizing what went right, even when you didn't give yourself credit in the moment. As we are reminded, wins come in all sizes, and the smallest ones often carry the most significant meaning. Maybe you didn't hit the milestone that you planned, but you did show up for yourself in ways that no one else saw. You rested when resting didn't feel natural. Maybe you even kept a promise to yourself. You did take that walk. You got the courage, to send that uncomfortable email. Perhaps you healed a boundary or you let go of something that was really nagging at you, or even let go of someone who was weighing you down. These are called micro wins, and they build confidence and momentum, helping you see your year as a collection of courageous moments rather than a series of shortcomings. So ask yourself, which actions in your daily life lifted you and which ones held you back? Reflecting on this moves us from self-judgment into self-awareness. Recent psychological research shows that when we examine our patterns honestly, without shame, we improve emotional regulation and make better decisions moving forward. Think of your habits like a river. Some currents carried you effortlessly toward your goals. Maybe a morning walk, journaling, staying hydrated, or committing to therapy. Other currents pulled you under. Maybe doom scrolling before bed, overcommitting, ignoring red flags, or prioritizing others at the expense of yourself. Reflection isn't about punishing yourself for the patterns that drained you. It's about finally recognizing them so you can choose differently next year. It's a gentle, compassionate accountability. And if we're being honest, this year probably shifted your priorities more than you realized. Our values evolve as we gain life experiences and live our lives. Both the challenges and the wins shape us. What mattered to us in January might feel irrelevant in December. Maybe at the start of the year, achievement was everything. The resolutions, the hustle, the check marks, the constant productivity. But somewhere along the way, you realized that joy mattered more. That peace matters. That mental health matters. That connection with others matters. Or maybe you learned how powerful it is to set boundaries, to take breaks, or to choose people who choose you back. These shifts aren't failures or setbacks. They're signs of evolution and growth. They're evidence that you're becoming someone more aligned, more intentional, and more whole. And then there's one of the most profound concepts psychology offers us, your emotional legacy. How you made others feel, how you made yourself think. Psychology reminds us that our emotional experiences shape our identity far more than our accomplishments. So ask yourself, who did I lean on? Who carried me when I was tired? Who held space for me when I couldn't hold it for myself? And equally important, who did I cheer on? Who did I encourage? Who did I pour into? Acknowledging the reciprocity of your year builds emotional gratitude, one of the strongest predictors of well-being, according to recent research on gratitude and emotional resilience. Finally, all these threads come together in one last essential question offered by Psychology Today's celebration of growth. What did this year teach you about who you are and who you're becoming? Because when you name your lessons, you reclaim your power. When you honor your evolution, you step confidently into the next chapter. You're constantly in flow, so take notice. Here's something that might bring these reflections to life. Imagine your year as a garden. The storms, like the disappointments, the sadness, maybe heartbreak, even your setbacks, they all may have felt destructive at the moment, but they also watered the soil. Every challenge nourished deeper roots, and the flowers that bloomed weren't because life was easy. They bloomed because you stayed grounded when the rain came. Here's another example. Maybe your year was like a river. Some days you paddled fiercely, some days you drifted. Some days you let the water carry you wherever it wanted. And reflection, it's the moment you pause your boat, look around, and finally see the beauty in the winding path that got you to this place, this moment in time. This isn't a report card. It's a reclamation. and it's all yours. So take a moment with me right now. If it's safe to do so, gently close your eyes and imagine this past year as a chapter in a book. If you were handing that book to someone you care about, what would you title this chapter? Sit with that for a second. Because when we name our experiences, we understand them differently. And here's the truth behind that reflection. The challenges you faced weren't random obstacles or inconvenient detours. They were the exact conditions that shaped you, the forging ground where your resilience, clarity, and courage were formed. Think about it. Every uncomfortable conversation, every disappointment, every moment where you questioned yourself, those weren't setbacks. Those were the moments that carved out your strength. And here's a real aha moment. Your emotional legacy, the story you carry forward, isn't defined by the accomplishments or how many wins you collected. It's characterized by how you showed up for yourself, how deeply you felt your life instead of numbing or shrinking from it, and how much you grew from everything you navigated. That is the chapter you're writing. And you know what? It matters. It's now time to answer some listener questions about how to reflect meaningfully as the year closes out. Remember, you can reach out anytime with your questions or messages at powercoachsuzie.com. I'd love to hear from you. Here's our first question. I feel like I failed this year. How do I really celebrate myself when things didn't go as planned? You know, that's such an honest and vulnerable question. And honestly, one that so many of us quietly carry but rarely say out loud. Feeling like you failed often comes from comparing your life to the version you imagined you'd be living by now. That timeline you created in your mind, the milestones you thought you'd hit, the version of yourself you expected to grow into a perfect schedule. But life doesn't unfold like a tidy checklist. It unfolds like a story, a narrative. A story with rewrites, surprise plot twists, unfinished chapters, and moments that make you pause and rethink everything. This is why it's so important to celebrate small wins alongside the big ones. This means noticing the subtle, often invisible acts of resilience that get lost in the noise of bigger goals. Think about it. Maybe you didn't achieve the milestone or goal you were shooting for, but you held your ground during a difficult conversation that usually would have shaken you. Perhaps you didn't finish the project you had high hopes for, but you stayed afloat emotionally during a season that demanded more of you than expected. That isn't failure. That's endurance. That's a strength that doesn't make headlines, but it shapes who you're becoming. Here's what can help. Start by recognizing something small and deeply personal. Something that isn't flashy but honest. Something that makes you look at yourself with softness and say, you know what? I did that. I really did. For example, maybe you finally stopped engaging with the people who drain your energy. Maybe you learned slowly and not perfectly to rest without feeling guilty. Maybe you showed up for someone else even when your heart felt heavy. Those aren't small wins. Those are meaningful shifts. When you focus on the accomplishments that you're proud of, it isn't about pressure or perfection. It's about changing the narrative in your mind. When you sit with that long enough with honesty, you sometimes realize that the things you labeled as failures were actually seedlings. They were developing new habits, new boundaries, maybe new strengths, new understandings of who you are and what you deserve. And when you look at your year through that gentler, more generous lens, celebrating yourself stops feeling forced. It becomes natural. And because you finally see the quiet, powerful strength you carried through every single day you thought you were barely holding on. So give yourself a hand. You did great. Here's our second question. How do I make sure I don't just repeat the same mistakes next year? I love this question because it comes from a place of self-awareness and not self-criticism. There's a big difference between wanting to grow and wanting to punish yourself. One moves you forward, the other shuts you down. And you know what? We've all been there. And the fact that you're even asking this tells me you're already in growth mode. So good job. It means you care enough about your life and your relationships and your patterns to pause and look inward. And that's powerful. So here's the truth. Avoiding mistakes isn't the goal. We all make mistakes. No one makes no mistakes. We all make mistakes. And if anything, errors are inevitable. They're part of being human, and it's okay. What is possible, though, is developing a kinder, more curious understanding of why those choices happened in the first place. Turning your year-end reflection into something meaningful isn't about being perfect. It's about being open, being honest, and being willing to see yourself without judgment. According to Alice Boys from Psychology Today, one surprisingly effective way to approach this is by giving yourself playful awards for the year. It may sound lighthearted, but that's precisely the point. Naming something like the plot twist I really didn't see coming award or the relationship wake-up call award gives you emotional breathing room and puts a little comedy in the mix. It takes the sting out of the situation and creates just enough distance for you to view it from a healthier perspective. Suddenly, what felt like a failure becomes information. It becomes data you can use. And that's when something shifts, because once you name a moment, you can understand it. And once you know it, you can begin to transform it. So instead of asking yourself, how do I avoid messing up again? A question rooted in fear. Try asking, what did this experience teach me about what I need, what I value, or where I'm growing? Maybe a mistake showed up that you stay too long in situations that drain you because you're afraid of feeling alone. Maybe it revealed that you tend to rush into commitments when you're overwhelmed or seeking validation. Perhaps it taught you that you overextend yourself, giving more than you have to offer. And you're finally realizing that replenishment isn't optional. This is the real work. And here's the encouraging part. You don't need a rigid plan or a New Year's resolution with strict rules. You need awareness, curiosity, and minor consistent adjustments. Growth isn't about repeating a mistake. It's about recognizing the pattern sooner, responding with more clarity, and course correcting with more ease. That's not just progress. That's evolution. And friends, growth isn't always dramatic or Instagram worthy. Sometimes it's quiet, gradual, soft, a slow shift in how you show up, how you choose, how you feel, how you care for yourself. And that slow shift, it really counts. Every single bit of it counts. Okay, let's pause again. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what part of your story this year still feels untold? Which moments, emotions, or choices have been tucked away waiting for you to give them attention? What part of your emotional journey feels unfinished, as if it's quietly shaping you behind the scenes, even if you haven't fully acknowledged it yet? Sit with that question for a moment, because sometimes the most powerful reflections aren't about what we accomplished. They're about what we endured, what we leaned into, and what we allowed ourselves to notice in the spaces in between. The most transformative part of reflection isn't just recognizing wins or lessons. It's permitting yourself to feel grateful for the struggle, to honor all those cracks, the rough edges, those moments of discomfort, the ones that make you squirm. Because you know what? It's precisely there in those broken or tender spaces that the light gets in. Now I want to share a story from a recent coaching session that really brought the idea of reflection and growth to life. And yes, I'll sprinkle in a little personal story too, because part of this work is reminding you that we're all human, navigating our own ups and downs alongside our clients. A client came into our session feeling completely defeated. She described her year as a mess up. She had lost a job she cared about, A friendship that mattered deeply had grown tense, and she felt like nothing she did was hitting the mark. I just can't get it right, she told me. And I could hear the weight of that exhaustion in her voice. The months of self doubt, the minor daily disappointments, the feeling that life was one long stretch of setbacks. We began with some guided reflection prompts, and I watched her slowly shift from that heavy everything went wrong mindset. We asked, what are the 3 things you actually accomplished this year? Which habits drained you and which gave you life? At first she hesitated, unsure if anything she named would count. But as she spoke, something shifted. She realized that she had shown up consistently, even in the weeks where self-doubt was louder. Interesting, right? She had built a new morning routine to ground herself, even though many days she hit snooze. But she did build that routine. She had taken steps to reconnect with a friend she feared she had lost. And just that act of courage and care was a meaningful win. I could see it in her posture. She sat a little taller, her expression softened. That moment of recognition, seeing that her failures weren't the whole story, allowed her to claim the quiet, sometimes invisible strength she had been carrying all year. That's the power of reflection. It lets you witness the strength that was there all along, even when the narrative in your mind tells you otherwise. And I have to admit, this session reminded me of my own year. I often present myself as confident, bold, unfiltered, but there were several chapters this year where I didn't feel at all fierce. There were weeks when I wondered if my work was, any good. My messages, even my voice, were they landing with anyone, or was I just talking into the wind? Some days it felt like I was really spinning my wheels. Between my family obligations, work, and lifing, it was hard. But in December, I went back through my notes, my calendar, my reflections, and what I found were moments of genuine connection, deep conversations with listeners, acts of self-care I almost forgot about, times when I showed up, even when I didn't feel like it. Even that extra appreciation of my family. These quiet wins weren't flashy, but they were profound. Recognizing them felt like uncovering hidden treasure I didn't even know I had buried. The lesson I took away, and the one I hope resonates with you, is this. Growth is rarely a straight line. Sometimes it's messy, quiet, and uneven. The wins are often hidden in the cracks, in the ordinary, in the moments where you kept going. And it's in reflection and naming those moments that you see the bigger picture of your resilience. You see that picture of your courage, your growth. So if you feel like your year was a mess up, take a step back. Look for those moments you showed up, the times you persisted, the choices you made to care for yourself and others. Those are your wins. Those are your power, and they matter probably more than you realize. So, friends, what did we cover today? We explored the true power of reflection, not just to celebrate wins, but also to honor the challenges, uncover the lessons, and recognize the quiet strength you've carried all year. We've asked guiding questions, shared metaphors to make the journey tangible, answered real listener concerns, and peeked into personal stories to show that growth is rarely perfect or linear. Reflection isn't just about looking back, it's your roadmap forward, helping you see not only what you've done, but who you're becoming. We also talked about how to shift perspective from failure to resilience, from overwhelm to awareness. Even the smallest wins, keeping a boundary or reconnecting with a friend, or even showing up when you felt like giving up, are evidence of your courage and commitment to yourself. As we saw through the coaching story, sometimes it's the quiet, consistent actions that carry the most meanings. Recognizing those moments allows you to step into your strength even in the midst of struggle. And let's not forget that reflection is about curiosity as much as it is about insight. Asking yourself questions about your habits, your priorities, and the emotional imprint you leave on others opens the door to growth in ways you might not expect. Your lessons learned aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they're subtle shifts, a new awareness, or acts of courage, maybe even a boundary. These accumulate into transformation over time. So as we close the year, remember, reflection is a gift you give yourself. It's an invitation to pause, to honor your journey, and to carry forward the wisdom, strength, and self-compassion you've cultivated. The path isn't always straight, but each step, each pause, each insight, it's building the next chapter of your life. One growth, gratitude, and intentional living at a time. So here's our affirmation to close out. Repeat after me, out loud in your mind, whatever you feel. I grew through what endured. I learned from what challenged me. I rise stronger and wiser. I grew through what endured. I learned from what challenged me. I rise stronger and wiser. I grew through what I endured. I learned from what challenged me. I rise stronger and wiser. Just one more time. Everybody with me. I grew through what I endured. I learned from what challenged me. I rise stronger and wiser. Let that sink in. Feel the weight of every lesson, every struggle, every quiet victory you carried this year. This isn't just a statement. It's a reminder that your growth is real. Your resilience is undeniable. Your next chapter is waiting for you, ready to be written by the strongest version of yourself. Thank you for being here with me, for leaning into this reflection, and for choosing to turn your lessons into light. Join us next week for another empowering discussion on signals and standards with Suzie, because your story matters. And growth, it's your birthright. Until then, reflect, rest, and rise. You can catch these episodes anytime on my podcast, Signals and Standards with Suzie, available on all your favorite listening platforms like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, and Blast the Radio. See you next time. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at Power Coach Suzie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsuzie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Suzie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.